Hello, Alfie. Happy Sunday.
Oh, good afternoon, good evening, Freddie. In this
Well, technically, yeah. We'll
weird,
pretend it's afternoon.
yeah,
It's
weird,
been a busy day, so we're a bit late, but we'll pretend it's the afternoon.
yeah, summer, bloody hot. Yes. So, what we're talking about today?
Well, you sent me a clip of a monologue from Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas.
Yeah, with Johnny Depp.
Well, lovely speech.
But this is going to be an ongoing
Yeah.
reflection on I nearly said 1986. Right, wake up. 1968, which will probably carry on over for the next couple of weeks, and then we get on to post-modernity. So what I'm going to do, attempt to look at 1986, take it up until 1989.
68, 69.
69. Yeah. I'm very sorry. I've just had a long session about mental illness and creativity. You've got onto some pretty heavy subjects. Anyway, what we're going to do is look at America. First and foremost. One, because American popular culture was very dominant in that particular period of time. But also, 1986 is a weird pivotal moment in not just America, but in European history.
Well, yeah. I mean, you hear about 68 all over the place.
Yeah.
With that's the whole summer of love thing. It's like you've got people, the post-war generation turning 18, 21. That's becoming adults at that point. And yeah, stuff happened all over the world. It seems like a really important year. And then the year after, we landed on the moon.
Yeah, and it's just, for America, it was quite traumatic.
Right.
It was very, it was so traumatic. I'm still trying to get my bloody head around it. One thing away from America for the moment was the.
Am I not educated? No.
What was the Prague Spring,
Right.
and this was when Czechoslovakia, for one brief moment, it appeared that they had managed to throw off the tyranny of the Soviet Union, and it was quite an amazing turnaround, and the whole of Western Europe and throughout the world, I think it was a bit, wow, this is incredible. Now, I've got this sense that this was at a time when the Soviet Union was stagnating anyway.
Right.
I think Brezhnev and all that were coming along, and there was no progression at all, except to crush a revolution. So, in the spring of 1968, I've got that right, the Russians, or the Eastern Bloc, Eastern Germany as well, decided, no, we're not going to allow this freedom at all, this freedom of expression, flowers and song, outbreak of artistic expression. We were just going to send in the tanks. And that's what they did.
Right.
Into Prague. And completely smashed what hope there was of any form of freedom. The political leaders of the so-called Prague Spring, they weren't in prison, they were just humiliated, like sent off to do administrative work on the further reaches of Czechoslovakia or the Republic or what have you, and were just forgotten about. So, that was one example of the beginning of a fracture that was, and it took a long time, as we know, within the Soviet Empire. As I say, my sense was that it was fragmenting anyway.
Right.
It was, nothing was happening. It was just stagnant. You know, but we didn't know that. This is in hindsight. Europe, NATO, and America didn't know just how stagnant it was. East Germany appeared to be a thriving economy and what have you, but it was just, it wasn't. I mean, it's all East Germany did. No, it's not. The East German secret police simply took over from the Gestapo.
Well, yeah.
They didn't have to do much to keep suppression
No.
where it was, and that's what it was. It was the Gestapo. Only it became far more insidious. It was like everywhere. Stasi was literally in every block of flats. There would be a Stasi.
They say that back then,
So everybody appeared to be
one in
spying.
4 people was informing for the
Yeah,
government.
and everybody appeared to be, now we know, spying on each other. Because of when East Germany fell, one of the things that the East German leadership tried to do was to destroy all the documents on the Stasi. It was like, those big buildings that are in front of us. That's how many documents they got nowhere near it. So, things in the Eastern Bloc were moving, but we didn't quite know. We didn't hear about that.
Yeah.
So, what I'm going to try desperately to do, is make sense of what was going on in America, the land that possibly dominated popular culture at that particular time. And the more, you see me today, I was pulling my hair out. I didn't even know where to begin.
Yes, no, indeed. Well, yeah, so it's a big topic, so
Yeah.
we just take
slices. We have to keep at the back of our mind Vietnam.
Right.
The Vietnam complex. That's complex conflict. That's at the back of our mind. Right. Interesting thing about that, the Americans wanted the United Kingdom to back them in their military operations.
Yeah.
Harold Wilson, the Labour Prime Minister, refused. He actually stood up to America and said, no way. Whether in fact because people realised that America shouldn't have been there anyway, is another matter. It's one of these secret things that the British government, or
dozens, if not hundreds, of historians to debate, isn't it? So what time period here? Just to clarify.
Yeah, I'm going to look at attempt.
So the Vietnam War is running.
Right, I'm going to start actually in 1968.
I'm going to start in 68.
Yeah, in Vietnam.
So how long have they been embroiled in this at that
Well,
point?
this is the problem. It was Kennedy, the first Kennedy, JFK, who got involved in South Vietnam.
Yeah.
Now, the reason that we know for that is because it wasn't about democracy. It wasn't about anything like that. It was purely economic. The Americans wanted South Vietnam because they had everything there. They had all the natural resources. But they didn't. It's this thing I've got about generals and power. They don't learn from history. The French got massacred in the 1950s. It was a French colony.
Okay.
And they got wiped at a place called Dien Bien Phu. They got encircled. The French army was encircled by a so-called peasant army.
Right.
And they had to, they surrendered. And in terms of military psychology, you wouldn't have expected anybody to say, well, what happened? Here's one of the top military nations in the world, and it's been defeated by a peasant army.
Well, there's certain places, isn't there, that
Yeah,
are just really difficult to invade. Like we were talking about Russia, like
Yeah.
the other week,
Yeah.
and how difficult that was to invade. And like
But-
Afghanistan
yeah.
is notoriously difficult to hold. So I guess Vietnam is one of these places.
I mean, in Afghanistan, they had, the tribes had this wonderful saying, you've got the watches, we've got the time. Now, you would have thought, well, hang about, this means something. Let's look at it. But no, generals being generals don't learn from history, go charging in. The first thing that happened where the Americans realised something was wrong, this is the American public, not the American general, not the American politicians, the American public realised, and that was called the Tet Offensive that took place in January 1968. You can tell I'm
So
reading my
the
notes.
beginning of '68.
Yeah,
Lovely.
yeah, in January
Right.
1968, the Tet Offensive.
So what was that?
Right, America was in the south,
Uh-huh.
supposedly training the South Vietnamese army to get them prepared for whatever war was coming their way. Everything was secure. Tet was has always been a big festival in Vietnam. And on this particular day in January 1968, all hell broke loose. Literally.
Right.
From out of nowhere, every city, every town, every village in South Vietnam was attacked by guerrillas.
Right.
And this took place at the time when the media was becoming powerful. So the image of this offensive was beamed around the world and was beamed into America. Question, what the hell's going on?
Well, yeah. Who attacked the villages?
In South Vietnam,
Yeah.
it was the Viet Cong.
Right.
They attacked everything.
Right.
But the big thing was in Saigon, the capital of South Vietnam. And the guerrillas managed to get into the grounds of the American embassy.
It's true.
They actually got into the ground. They didn't get into the embassy itself, but into the ground.
Right.
And that had a psychological
Well, yeah,
effect.
that's American territory
That's
in a real
American-
legal sense. Yeah.
Not only that, I was picking up news. It was happening all over South Vietnam.
Right.
Now the thing was, it was a failure. The actual offensive was a military failure because nothing was held.
It was just a strike.
Yeah, and the idea was, to hold it. It lasted 3 days, and eventually the Americans drove out the guerrillas, and they lost not the Americans, but the guerrillas lost a hell of a lot of men. So you could say it was a victory for the Americans.
Right.
But this is where the butt come in, the psychological effect on America. This should not have happened.
There's a vulnerability there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How did it happen? What is Vietnam anyway to us?
Yeah.
This was the question. Nobody had answered this before. What is the question here? What is going on? But then you get something else came up in Vietnam, and I haven't got the exact date, but again it was in 1968,
Right.
and this was the formation. No, I'll leave that alone for a moment.
All right. Okay. We'll leave that.
What
alone.
happened
Go on.
in 1968 was a group of fully armed American soldiers marched into a village called My Lai
Right.
in South Vietnam, which they was meant to be protecting. In this village, there's been no recorded information about guerrilla networks. Most of the men were far away in the fields working. And these soldiers, within the course of a couple of hours, killed 500 women and children and set fire to the village.
Right.
And there's, you can just get on YouTube and see all the documentation. Who gave the orders? Why did they do it? No one knows. Again, was there a psychology going on? Right. Was there something else at play? And so you can imagine how this was being played out in America. What the hell are we doing? Aren't we meant to be protecting people? These are unarmed civilians, women and children, in a village where there's no Viet Cong activity, which there wasn't. What are we doing? So from the jaws of a victory at the so-called Tet Offensive, where the Americans won,
all the goodwill at home's gone. People starting to question why are we doing this?
What are our young boys doing in America, out there?
Yeah.
What? At the same time, which they do in America, don't they now? Aeroplanes started to land with coffins. American troops.
Repatriation.
No, dead.
Flights. Yeah. Repatriation.
Yeah. And again, what are we bloody doing? No one's telling us. Why are we here? So there was a slow erosion of trust in their own psychology. Here we are, the biggest military power in the world, and we seem to be, for whatever reason, committing crimes. We don't seem to be able to hold any, any sort of, we can't contain the guerrillas. All these questions started to be answered, questioned in the media. So
it's a bit of an American disease, that though,
Sorry?
isn't it? Like that mindset rears its head in America. Like it took them a long time to get involved in World War II. You've got all the stuff now with why are we still in Iraq and Afghanistan? Bring the troops home. They don't. I suppose it's such a big country, and it's separated from the rest of the world by two oceans, and they do seem to be a bit more insular or reticent to get involved in the wider world, even though they are the supreme military power. And this is like you say, there's a repeating refrain of this sort of attitude.
What was also going on, which wasn't meant to go on at all, was that the Air Force, American Air Force, had started using napalm and, importantly, Agent Orange in North Vietnam.
Right.
Cover up. This was a big cover up.
Okay, right.
Now, Agent Orange, there are still, children are still being born across Vietnam with the defects of Agent Orange. Now, it's when a series of papers came out called the Pentagon Papers,
right,
that highlighted this whole sense of we're being lied to. The American public are being lied to.
Okay.
And like in all big nations and empires, a lot of people didn't much care, and a lot of people did care. So there wasn't a big split, but the cover-up was beginning of this endless war. They didn't know what was going on.
Oh, yeah.
And then it began to be obvious that American pilots were being shot down. So their superiority of aeroplanes were being undermined. This is where Russia does come in. Sorry.
To Russia, like, is that a function of war reporting getting better?
Sorry?
Is that a function of war reporting getting better in many ways? Like,
Yeah.
because no wars before they'd really been in the news, and probably, you know, World War II was just propaganda on both sides, you know, like, and no one really knew what was going on. There's a war on. We don't need to know. We're just getting on with it. But like, we were talking about post-war freedom and the expression of that freedom. You've got more free press and more easier flights out to places like that for journalists to actually find out what's going on, and is it maybe a function of more knowledge? And it's not that it's necessarily that different.
Yeah.
All right, the chemicals being used are different.
No,
but the
it
activity and action of a military power really going hardcore.
Well, you know what I feel about generals.
Horrible
you know,
things
yeah,
to an enemy isn't new.
But then you had this guy, General Westmoreland, who said, well, of course, the North Vietnamese are different to us. They're uncivilized. They're almost they're almost subhuman. And you think, well, that's gone against the grain. And I mentioned this before. General MacArthur, when they was in the Second World War, when the Americans were what they called island jumping.
Yeah.
And the Americans really thought that the Japanese were, as a race, not as an army, but as a race of people, a race of savages. They didn't.
Well, this is prevailing view of most cultures.
But it was when they got to Okinawa.
History.
It was when the Americans got to Okinawa that was the Japanese soldiers were never going to give up, so they were going to fight to the end. But it was a civilian population. It was one of the only islands where there was a big Japanese civilian population. They started to commit suicide because they were afraid of the Americans.
Okay. And
there's some really heartbreaking scenes where American troops, through translators, are trying to stop women with their children from jumping off of cliffs. Literally trying to stop them.
Okay.
And it was only when the American troops came across families, mostly women and small children and older people, that they realised, no, these people are human beings. It's the army
that was savage.
I mean, but that's because of
in an armed conflict is going to have to be a little savage, if not a lot.
Again, we're shifting away slightly.
Yeah, we are a bit.
But up until about 1925, Japan was an incredible country. It was more freedom almost than in Europe.
Right.
One thing happened that literally overnight changed the whole course of Japan, and that was an earthquake on Tokyo. I think it was Tokyo, which was absolutely terrifying. It was absolutely devastating. There were sort of huge fireballs sweeping people up into the air.
Wow.
And the American extreme right, which was still there, but they were fast diminishing, along with the military, said this is sent by the gods, basically, because we've moved away from the true Japanese world order, that we are a superior race.
Right.
Hence, that's when they went into Manchuria, and the horrendous massacres that were taking place, that carried out by the Japanese. So, and again, it's this perception that the world was having at that time as well. Japan walked out, it was the first country to walk out the UN, because they was condemned about the slaughter that was going on in Manchuria. So where am I going with that? Yeah, generals, madness, and America not quite understanding. forgetting their own history of what they had learned in the Second World War. Now, whether that quote from
that being
Westmoreland,
that your enemy,
Yeah.
once you get to know them and
Yeah.
their families, are
Yeah,
not
whether
as
that-
savage or subhuman as you might have thought.
but it transpired also, Mali wasn't just a one-off. This was going on quite a lot. But because of 500 innocent people, it became a central point, you know, something's going on there. Now, was it because
We lose that. Is it on the other side?
the generals didn't know how to fight guerrillas? They had no clue. They believed in sending tanks into the jungle, hence Agent Orange and all that. But was there something sort of, again, a superiority on coming down from the top, down to the troops on the ground? Because one person was convicted of that massacre, General, Sergeant Calley, I think his name was.
Right.
All the people at the top,
Got away with it.
they got away
Well,
with it.
that's militaries for you, I suppose.
So you have this slow breaking down of, what are we doing there, man? Why are we there? Why are we losing young men on a very big scale against a group of bloody farmers? Forgetting, of course, that to be a guerrilla, you're not a farmer. You're trained. You know what you're fighting for.
Well, yes, you're fighting for your back garden, like we
Yeah.
spoke about the Spanish
Yeah.
guerrillas a few weeks ago,
And
things like that. Yeah.
it's like in all major wars, you don't bomb people into submission.
No, you
But what
just-
the Viet Cong, the North Vietnamese, were doing, they began to build tunnels,
right.
big underground tunnels from North Vietnam into South Vietnam, into the south, into Saigon, where they could listen to what was going on. You can't make this up. It's Skyfire, and it remained, why were you there? Because we've got to defend freedom. But they was walking all over freedom. They, the generals were, and then it sort of transpired that most of the soldiers who were going in, the GIs, were given a choice: either go to prison or join the army.
Oh, that's been the choice
Yeah,
faced
but
by
basically-
young criminals for centuries.
But basically, these young men.
I'd bring that back,
Yeah, well, you would. But these
Well,
young
but
men, no,
it's-
hang about. These young men weren't going to Europe, but they probably thought they were going. They were going into a land
They're going to
that even their
conflict,
bloody
yeah.
generals didn't understand.
Yeah.
So
But yeah, I mean, our
That's-
army was
yeah,
made
that
up
set
of
up
criminals
this
for,
sort
for
of
centuries.
this thing, this '68 anxiety in America. That was, all those demonstrations began to happen, and they were really supported by a whole cross section of the population, because the population began to say, "Why are we there? What's going on?"
We're doing.
But then you have all this other stuff that goes on in America in '68. You have, here we go, Robert Kennedy,
Yeah,
the brother of JFK,
yeah,
was the Attorney General.
right.
He was running for the president, and he would have won. This guy was a tough operator.
Right,
He had taken on the mafia and beat them.
right, okay.
So I mean, and he was highly
Strong law and order
respected.
credentials, then, yeah.
Incredibly, people really. He was incredibly charismatic. He could walk into a room and suddenly, wow, man, who is that guy?
Yeah,
Assassinated.
right.
Then, and that was in June 1968. He was assassinated. So any sort of hope went with him. The American Democratic Party sort of all had a nervous breakdown, and they eventually elected George McGovern, who was the equivalent of our Jeremy Corbyn.
Right.
You know, didn't have a clue. Then you had the Chicago riots, which was the Democratic Convention, and riots and army let loose. So that began to think, well, you know, what's going on? Can it get much worse? Well, unfortunately, yes, because then in April 1968, Martin Luther King assassinated.
Right.
Civil rights, you know.
It's a lot of leaders.
Sorry?
There's a lot of people in leadership positions just taken.
And of course, riots broke out. You know, here's enough. You know, what's going on? We're losing good people here. We're not just losing out there, young men, but we're losing good people here. Something's going wrong here in America.
Society is not serving
Yeah, it's not
people in the way it
the
should.
self-confidence that was there is being shattered, and it's being shattered by lies, incompetence, arrogance as well. We got them. Everything we got is bigger than everything else in the world. Even our poverty is better than other people's poverty. That's a cynical thing to say, but that was all planned. And you know, I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, why is this all going on in 1968?
Yes.
Was there something in the stars that was sort of?
That's just America and a little bit of Czechoslovakia, and we'll leave it. Like there's other that's
Yeah.
all over the world stuff. Well,
You know, you had
another day for
you
those
had the
things,
Paris.
but like,
You had the Paris riots,
yeah.
May '68.
So what is it?
Yeah, I don't know yet.
I think we'll
we're
spend
going to
the
hit that.
rest of
Not
time-
tonight. I don't.
No, we'll
because
spend the rest of time working this out.
Yeah,
I think,
I mean,
Alfie, but
I really want to look at this next week.
yeah.
Because there's something about that date.
So
that- I mean, it's not magic. It's nothing about that. But there's something going on.
yeah. So
But it's like that clip
yes,
from Johnny Depp playing Hunter Thompson when he looks out the window and he says, and that, I actually forget the speech.
yeah. He's talking.
you know,
he's talking about
yeah,
how the wheels of change are
Yeah,
coming.
and
In the
you
middle
know,
of
wherever
60s
you
was
look,
a great time to
yeah,
be alive, and it
Yeah,
really felt
and
like
wherever
the
you
world
look,
is changing
sparks were flying all
everything.
over the place, and you know, and it wasn't about violence. It was just about we wanted something new, and then that
a
really
revolutionary
sad
spirit
ending
to
when he
itself.
says, and now, 5 years later, with the right kind of eyes, you look across at the mountain in San Francisco, and you can see the line where the wave hits and slowly come back. I mean, it's the most moving
It's a lovely speech. Yeah.
little speech, actually. So there's something in that. What went wrong?
I mean, I guess it's a revolutionary spirit. I mean, certainly that speech is revolutionary, and I guess one could categorize major things like that as revolution because it's a swift change. So you know, assassinating Robert Kennedy gives a swift
Yeah,
change
but
to
the
the
big thing about the
Democrats. Assassinating
demonstrations
Martin
against
Luther King
Vietnam.
gave a swift change to the nature of the civil rights movement. You've got these are swift changes, so there's a revolutionary aspect to that.
Well,
and I
yes
suppose
and
they're
no, because
also
what was interesting about the peace marches, they weren't. A lot of them were organised by American troops.
right.
They started it off, and it wasn't about a revolution. It was simple: bring them back home. That was the cry.
So
Bring them
that's a
back home.
simple policy change.
Yeah.
It's just those.
So it wasn't.
but there's
it gets caught up
peripheral
with
horror.
some other stuff that I'm going to.
peripheral horror of
Yeah.
murder, assassination, and
And then Yeah, but I think I've got to look at this 68 in
Man,
far
I
more.
think we're going to look at 68 a lot.
But then
because it's fascinating.
sort of other things began to take place a bit later. America was still engaged in a losing war. They knew that they was losing it. The Viet Cong had become a really high-powered professional army. And again, you could say it was a bit like they weren't as brutal as the Japanese. That there was a sense of it was total war.
Right.
I've got this thing about the Second World War. That we were into total war.
Yeah, every
Russia was
arm
into
of the
total
state,
war,
every person, everyone.
except one country.
Pointing in, to
one
get a
country
definition
did
of
not
total.
have total war until
Yeah.
1944, and that was Nazi Germany.
Yes, they, yeah.
One of the reasons behind that was because the Nazis believed in the family and they believed in the woman. So women don't go to war; they stay at home.
Well, I guess there's no point
Now,
trying to create Lebensraum if you're not allowing anyone to do any labeling.
Yeah, but also in Vietnam, in North Vietnam, everybody was involved in the war. Everybody, even down to children.
Yeah.
Women in particular, manning guns, women flying aeroplanes,
Right.
MiG fighters.
Everybody fighting
And
for their
here's
home.
America, sort of fighting another war, basically. I mean, they were fighting another war. I don't know what type of war they were fighting. It certainly wasn't the Second World War. It was something else. They were fighting savages, maybe. I don't know. But as I said, we've got to keep looking at that, because then we have this sort of, it goes on, popular culture, and you see it begin to affect cinema. In cinema, you're beginning to get the questions, and some brilliant cinema. Independent cinema wasn't, as a lot of people think, anti-American. It was a new way of questioning consumerism. It was a new way. What was interesting?
It's not anti-American, but maybe asking what America is. Sort of thing.
Let's call it anti-consumerism for now.
Okay.
And there were really some absolutely excellent movies. And I'm not thinking of Apocalypse Now. I mean, that was it's an interesting film, but it's based upon an English book, isn't it? Heart of Darkness. And Vietnam is a backdrop. So in terms of American popular culture, there was what appeared to be a new lease of life was developing.
Right.
The English so-called invasion of America, swinging London, swinging that, that was coming to an end. American music was on the rise again.
Okay.
Some very good bands were coming on, but it was all getting a bit too big as well. In this country, all the little clubs that made those groups what they were, including the Beatles, were all closed down. So they were becoming more of this, they needed more money. They needed, money was flowing in. Again, there's a change going on, but you can't put your finger at it. You can't say this is exactly what was going on. There's a few dates where you say 68. It's a crazy world, But then, if we could just move forward, that you had.
Maybe just before we move forward, if you maybe just give us a couple of examples of some of the movies that were coming out around that time that were sort of making.
Oh my God. Can I do that next week?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I'll make a note of that. Because they are good, and some of the big open events, not the rock festivals. I'll get onto that in a moment. But some of the movies, and also B movies, who were more questioning. Roger Corman, his factory of B movie films, were producing some quite interesting films. There was a good one, and I think this was towards the end of that particular decade. I think it was a Corman financed movie. An American officer turns up at this family home, Thanksgiving I think it is, to tell them that their son has been killed in Vietnam.
Right.
The mother doesn't believe it. And what happens is the son returns, looking like a zombie.
It's quite a familiar motif.
Yeah, it's like that English Gothic story, the Claw,
Right.
where if you have this claw, somebody dead comes back.
Okay.
Again, sorry, this is so confusing to me. You're probably anyway. What happens is the son is dead.
Right. Oh, okay. So he's actually dead. It's not
Yeah,
one
and
of
what
these
he wants to
mother's
do-
love and a mother's faith means that you're
He
not
wants
really dead
to
thing.
take revenge on the community that sent him to war
Okay.
because he doesn't succeed. But this,
That's strong,
yeah,
that's really strong, fitting what we were just talking about, and like as an
you know,
expression
and
of
it's-
like all these
this is why I love
dead young men, yeah.
This is why I love American B movies. They can hit the nail on the head with sentiments. I mean, they're cheaply made, they're tacky, but there's always something else going on
Yeah.
because they know their audience far better than the big.
The hoi polloi elite
Yeah,
filmmakers.
and
yeah.
also, what am I on about? American independent films threw up these actors, writers, and directors. But who was waiting in the background? The corporations. So you want to make a film? We'll give you the money. Even down to Easy Rider, that great American road movie.
Yeah.
Which I really didn't like actually. It was heavily financed. So suddenly independent creativity became reliant upon the corporation, the corporate.
Well, yeah.
The
Artists have always needed patrons.
yeah, but
At
it
least
was like
it's not the state.
so the independent energy that sparked a good couple of years in America, like it did in the 50s. It just got eaten up, basically. It ended up with Star Wars and stuff like that. But I am waffling a bit here, aren't I? And then in 1967, you had the 6 Day War,
Right.
Israel and the Arab states.
Yeah.
I don't really know how that affected America or Russia, but it achieved what is now evident is that Moshe Dayan, the Israeli general with a patch over his eye,
Right.
he said that we don't need to go into the Gaza Strip. We can keep hold of Jerusalem, but the Gaza Strip will cause problems. He said this.
Right.
He actually broke his promise. He went into the Gaza Strip, and the rest is history. He had no, I know the Israeli government weren't too happy about that, but it was a war they won. They gained all this territory, which they didn't need because most of it was in the Sinai Desert. But it had a big impact on the world. This little nation taking on all these big nations.
Well, it's new nation actually acting like a nation.
And so that happened in '67. Now I'm going to jump into another part of American culture, and that stemmed out of that so-called Summer of Love, which by the time San Francisco become popular, the actual idea surrounding Haight-Ashbury, where all these flower power people were meant to be gathering, had finished. It was a project based upon self-help, the American way of self-help at the time, health, and an attempt at various forms of sort of community living.
Right.
But it had stopped. They had realised that it was a bit of a dream. But what happened was there was an attraction for young American teenagers and young adults. A lot of them weren't exactly drug addicts then, but they went to that place because there was a myth of flower power, peace and love, dancing and all this.
Yeah.
It was an illusion, and what began to happen was that in that illusion, the prostitution, mental health, drug addiction rocketed
Right.
sky high, and a lot of hustlers came in preaching peace and love, and they were, they were mind fuckers basically.
Right.
And I got a great book about that, just called The Mind Fuckers, and they would set themselves up as gurus and what have you.
Take advantage of the hopes and
and of course chief amongst them
titillations
was
of these young folks.
Charles Manson
Ah, yes.
and the family. Now this guy had spent most of his life in and out of institutions,
Right.
but he was charismatic to a certain type of young person. He was promising peace and love and what have you, and he could decode a Beatles song, Helter Skelter.
Right.
He said, if you listen to that, it's all in there, man. It's there, man. You can hear it. It's about the coming racial war. It's all there. And this is what's going to happen. So
Right.
you have all these drugged out sort of kids going, yeah, man, yeah. And when they went on, we don't know how many people they killed, his so-called family. We do know that they killed in the most gruesome manner Sharon Tate and her friends. He didn't carry out the murder, but his disciples carried out the murder.
Right.
And a couple of days later, they killed another couple. And again, if you look at YouTube, what am I on about YouTube? You will see these mostly women or girls with pus coming out their feet, because Manson used them as his angels, as he called them, and he would invite Hell's Angels to come along to huge great orgies where they were just quite literally fucking these kids. Manson was there as the great god, and just in the undercurrent.
Yes, there's your free
this
love
is
and
this is this undercurrent of American popular culture. But Manson was into music. He always see himself as being one of the greatest rock musicians ever, and he made contact with the Beach Boys.
Okay.
And I think it was Dennis Wilson who fell for this character until he realised this character was a murdering bastard, basically. He was a psychopath, but he literally couldn't get rid of him. Once in a personality like Manson never goes. That might be one of the reasons that Wilson had this massive great breakdown. So with all the chaos and murder and mayhem going around Manson, he would be playing his guitar, imagining that he was going to be the next Beatle or something. until he was incarcerated. He was incarcerated along with his some of his angels. But as I say, if you look at the state of these people, the physical state of these angels, it is pretty awful. And they lived out in the desert. And this is where this thing comes in about how many people did they kill?
Yeah.
You know, so it's
And it's
welcome
just
to.
So that comes out of this, you know, they take this freedom idea, you give your whole, like you say, your communes and your free love and your happiness, and then someone, some strong, dark, charismatic character will come in and take advantage.
Mind fuckers, basically. They're like these. You can imagine a sort of a biblical movie of a character coming out of the desert. I bring you peace. I bring you water. I bring you gold. I bring you fame. Hallelujah! You know, only in America can you have that mad sort of evangelical who really believe all that. I think it's
Well, I don't know,
whether
I
he
think
was
it can
coming
happen
from
in
that,
a lot
but
of places, you know.
I mean, what he was tapping into was loneliness.
Right. Okay.
All the people who went to visit him, who he convinced were his angels, were really dysfunctional, lonely young people.
Well, I suppose you get that now. I suppose that's one of these like cult 101 kind of things nowadays, isn't it? If you're looking at people who might be vulnerable to cults, or people who might, you know, how to get them out. It's people who lonely, no home life, you know, difficult, you know, no relationship with their parents, all that. You know, these things have become stereotypes and archetypes. But I guess that's from learning and seeing what he did.
But it also fits into when the so-called alternative culture had outlived itself, and it knew it. You know, the people who were leading that, they left it, but they left. Other people came in, as I say, the mind fuckers came in, and they see. You know, this was their life.
Power grab and some adulation.
Yeah. And then we had this strange phenomenon that came up in 1969, Woodstock.
Right.
That was turned into a film, meant to be peace and love. Some amazing groups, and it was a free festival over 3 days.
Yes, it is the
Now things begin
synonymous name.
Yeah,
free
things begin
festivals
to
in that
unravel a
time
bit
and
when
culture
we
and music.
actually look at it.
Oh yeah.
How did the film get made, and when was it planned?
Oh.
Because for the time, that film is very good.
Okay.
All these different cuts and different images. And thankfully, the opening, Ricky Avens, Freedom, it's still absolutely phenomenal. One man on stage sweating. And he's asked to play longer because we have a bit of a problem here, folks. All the roads leading into Woodstock are blocked. 3-day festival, free festival. That's how it was advertised. No food. There was no food. No security. There was no health precautions. No toilets.
Right.
This was this great festival.
Yeah, just people coming together, and you have to look after yourself. Lovely.
Yeah, but somewhere along the line, somebody was already making and building up a financial empire on that. So everything was getting out of hand.
Someone always
and
is.
the people who came in to help out was the enemy, man. It was the police. They realised that what was going on in Woodstock was a disaster. So they
And
went
they
in.
kind of realised they have some sort of
Yeah, they
duty of
went
care
in.
for the
They
safety
went
of-
in, and you won't hear about this in the more romantic interpretations. In they go, and they begin to sort out the health problems. They begin to sort out the illegal problems of not just smoking dope, but really heavy drugs. The problems of rape, of gang rape. The problems of sanitation. So the enemy happens to be the old Bill, who are trying desperately, which in some cases to save a lot of lives.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's
So
yeah,
you see the film,
yeah,
and
yeah.
yeah,
But then that's
if you
just
can get to
about
watch
the
it, you think, oh, you know.
free love and
But
the freedom
and
and the
guess
thing.
who stole the show, but stole something else, and that was the Who. They turned that evening performance, and it is absolutely magnificent. I mean, it really is. I mean, this is when they was at their height. But the only reason they performed is this in this free festival. They knew there was money involved in this, so they went before they went on. They went backstage. According to rumour, but knowing that lot is probably true. Pete Townsend and Roger Daltrey. Roger Daltrey used to work in a steel factory, so he was no one's idiot.
Yeah.
So Townsend said, "Well, where's the money? Hey man, you know, come on man, you know, this is free man. No, we want the money before we go on. We want money. Hey man, come on man, chill, chill man." Anyway, there was money because the organiser, whose name I forget, phoned up for an helicopter to bring in the money. Otherwise, but not only that, Daltrey, according to legend, and I love it because I'm going to believe it, you know I'm a fan of The Who, picked up this metal pole and said, "If you don't give us the fucking money, she's going up your arse." Freedom! Freedom!
Well, yes, there's a fine line between freedom and anarchy. It's being demonstrated quite well here.
So here you have this complete breakdown.
No, but then that's you mods, isn't it?
Yeah.
With your new jobs, and you've finally got a bit of disposable
Yeah,
income.
and
He's just embodying that culture in
You know,
his
but the amount of
wanting to be
mayhem,
paid for his labour.
the amount of mayhem that was going, you know, maybe if they had sat, a bit like the generals, they had sat back and said, "Okay, look, we might have a bit of a problem here. We got all these top," and they were top bands, and it's a free festival, and there's only a few rows that can get people. Maybe, you know, maybe a few toilets, maybe a little bit of sanitation. So you had that, right, which became another mythology. It became all over the Western world. Let's have free concerts. Let's have a free concert there. That was getting bigger and bigger and more stupid. I mean, I was meant to go to one at the Isle of Wight. As far as I remember, we didn't get anywhere near Portsmouth to go over to the Isle of Wight. We're just two stones. But you have this other one, very interesting. You have this other little thing. How are we doing for time?
It's probably been nearly an hour.
Okay, right, here we go. So we've done Woodstock. That was in August 1969, right? Woodstock. And then you have, in December 1969, the Rolling Stones, free concert at Altman. I can never pronounce it. Yeah, I mean, call it Altman. You can check it out. I'll give you all the details later. Free concert.
Right.
The Rolling Stones at this place, evening concert. Hey man, we're the Stones. We're edgy. We're dangerous. We don't need security. We've got Hell's Angels.
Well, you'd hope that was
Not Hell's Angels. We are going to pay them, not in money, but in booze. Brilliant.
That is brilliant. One, they're hard as nails. Two, they like booze. Three, you're definitely going to be secure with a plan like that. No one's going to mess with the Hell's Angels
Well,
when
one
they're
person
tanked
got
up.
stabbed to death by Hell's Angels.
Well, they probably did something wrong, Alfie. They probably broke some of the carefully thought out rules. Of
Yeah. But the Stones turn up. Now, these are classic. I mean, if you if you can spend an hour just looking at Altman, the Stones turn up and they start off with "Good to see you."
Sympathy for the Devil.
It's already out of control because
Fantastic.
the Hells Angels are keeping order with chains, broken bottles. They're just charging the audience. You have Mick Jagger going, "Peace and love, man, call it, man," dressed all in this sort of silly costume
Shiny
that they were
tight
wearing.
leather or something, yeah.
But
or
then
whatever it
there's
is.
there's a brilliant shot of this Hells Angel looking at Mick Jagger and have to say, "You're a wanker." It's a classic shot. Well, of course, what did the Stones do? Back in the helicopter, they took off.
How many songs did they play?
That was it. That was
Just the one song.
yeah, because it was like, "Hey man, call it," and they were being booed.
Right.
You know, "Oh man, you know, peace and love, freedom. What's gone wrong?" Well, basically, you just got Hells Angels pissed out of your
It's
head.
like, yeah, if you want for the Free Love on one hand, like, but that doesn't go with the rock on the other hand. Like, the rock is like
But it's like,
visceral and
you know, well, they were just playing. You know, that was edgy, man. That was, you know, they were
Yeah.
at the cutting edge. They really know what they were doing. I mean, I just think it very funny that,
bloody hilarious.
you know, because I'm not a great fan of the Stones.
Well, no, I know you're
You
not.
know,
You see,
but
I like the Stones. I like
No,
that track.
there's some good stuff that they did, but they, you know, they're a bit too aristocratic for me. But that sums it up. That sums it up about, like, American like generals don't do something that you don't know nothing about. You know? Please, one guy got stabbed to death, right? And a lot of people after that, and a lot of the people were there. So, you know.
So they flew it,
Yeah, you know.
played a song, and set
Well, no,
a
they
load
didn't
of
play
drunk. Oh, just with that playing in the background
they
on the way
started.
in. They started it, right?
And it wasn't the audience that kicked off.
It was Hells Angels, the security.
It was the security. Wow, you know.
So they kick off.
Yeah. Jagger
And then
spends
Jagger-
about 25 minutes trying to calm everything down with
And
peace
then
and
they-
love.
they flew out again.
There's a couple of clips.
It's leaving a riot behind
Yeah,
them, sort of.
but there's a couple of clips of
That's very rock and roll.
of Jagger. No, they should have got stuck in. They should have got stuck in, man. But there's a couple of clips that you can see where Jagger is being shown what had actually happened, and you can tell he's visibly shocked.
What, they couldn't just trust people to be nice and
Yeah,
get
you know,
along? What is that?
well, you know, we're talking about the 60s,
It's a
man.
form of
coming-
madness, I guess. It's
It's all coming to an end.
it's that Rousseauian idea that we're all just delightful, and
Yeah.
if we're left alone, it'll
Yeah,
all be peace
you
and
know,
love.
they-
It's just nonsense.
And you know, with the Stones, they believed in their own mythology. They believed. I mean, Mick Jagger with that voice, trying to control. I mean, you look at those Hells Angels, and you wouldn't dare to say boo to one of them because they'll probably rip off your head.
Oh yeah.
So, what started out in '68 as something quite unique began to fall apart towards the end. Now, Richard Nixon came along, Tricky Dicky, and he won the election. Not because of all the protests, it was because of Charlie Manson. The Manson murders had a big effect on Middle America. Their homes were not secure.
Their children are not necessarily secure. Yeah.
So Nixon played upon that, but he was up against the Jeremy Corbyn candidate. And you could say, well, you know, the rest becomes history. We move into the 70s. So I think that's coming to an end on that one.
Yeah, no, it's such a fascinating period, and there's so
I know,
much to
that's
cover.
why I'm
We'll
pulling,
just keep-
that's why you see me today pulling my head out. What the hell's going on here?
Well, yeah, 68. But yeah, I think
We haven't even got onto Europe.
Well, no, I think we can revisit this in different ways, and it's like you say, we're hitting the different cultural aspects coming up to it, and try and dig down into what was going on at that point.
And the person,
What was that?
What makes it even funnier, no, sicker, is that the Vice President of America for Nixon, Spiro Agnew, invented that phrase, the great silent majority. He ended up in prison because of the Watergate. So this, so only in America, folks.
It's fascinating. It's a fascinating period. So what have we learned? We've learned that the Vietnam.
It's like that song.
It just started to what did we learn? We learned that.
And don't forget that the Vietnam War was still going on.
Right. Yeah.
And I think we can touch upon this next week how it ended.
Right.
It was Kissinger, was meant to be Kissinger, and what's his name? Nixon. Nixon was the madman threatening to nuke North Vietnam to bring them into the Paris conference.
Right.
I don't know too much about that, but America wanted out. They just wanted out, and they kept on saying, look, the South Vietnamese army, it can contain the North Vietnamese. And there's that great scene of the American embassy with helicopters coming down to pick up Americans and to fly them out, and on this big aircraft carrier, aeroplanes being dumped into the sea. So they left South Vietnamese to continue the fight for freedom, and in no time at all they was overrun. So the question
Go on.
is, what the fuck were they doing there anyway?
Yeah, well, were they right to be there? Were they not right to be there? What should they
That
have
was
been
the only
doing?
thing I
And
liked
those
about
are questions
this
for
is another one that
we're
gets-
the arts end of this, not
This
the
is another one that gets people a bit annoyed. I'm not a great, well, I don't like The Deer Hunter. I like some of the performances. I love Christopher Walken and these performers, absolutely brilliant. But the whole thing about Russian roulette and all that, forget it. But that film did capture the madness of the last couple of days in Saigon, when the Americans had left. So I think I'm sorry, it's all very confusing. As you can see, I'm very confused my bloody
we
self.
are exploring post-war
And
up to 68 in repeated ways, and it's going to be confusing.
But then, from the Vietnam War, you got Cambodia. You got the Khmer Rouge.
Yeah.
That came about because of the Vietnam War, because the Vietnam had these roads where they was moving arms in. Now, I'll just touch upon this. We're out of a time scale. This is in the 70s. The Khmer Rouge, it's very interesting. The elite of the Khmer Rouge were the elite of the old Cambodia.
Right.
I want to go back, not next week.
Some point.
So again, it was the farmers who carried out the killing fields,
Yeah.
who emptied Phnom Penh. They were not communist. They were this weird Buddhist elitist sect. What were they doing? What did they want to set up? It was simple. They wanted to confront North Vietnam. There was something going on, and and again, it's something that is not known very well. Thatcher, America, France up to a point, supported the Khmer Rouge because the North Vietnamese were supposed to be communist. So again, power politics.
Oh yeah, that's the backdrop.
When people are out
of the whole
of,
period, though, isn't it?
when people get out of debt, and with that type of politics going on, and those weird cults that surround Buddhism. Forget about peace-loving Buddha and Confucianism. The Chinese. I'm just going to finish now, just by saying, Chairman Mao, right?
Yeah.
He used all the iconography of Lenin.
Yes,
But
right.
read closely into some of his texts, and it's very much a very hard line, Confucius concept of society. Because he had this whole idea, Confucius, about how society should be governed. It's there. But one of the many crimes that Mao committed took place in the 50s. It wasn't the Cultural Revolution. I mean, that was hell, but this was the beginning of something. What happened is always a mystery. Some people say that these particular birds got on Mao's nerves. It was a sparrow who woke him up too often. So he passed a law that all sparrows should be killed.
I've heard that one, yeah.
And they were.
Yeah.
And you know what happened?
Absolute power and all that.
No, but basically, one of the biggest famines in China's history. Because sparrows feed off of insects.
Yeah, totally disrupts the food chain.
So the ecology.
Yeah.
But, because of this strange mixture of cultism, Buddhism, Confucianism, a little bit of Marx, not Marx, a little bit of Lenin kicked into it. You're fucking up, man.
Well, yeah, no, I think that's a great
I'm
subject
mad.
for another time.
Yeah.
Because when was the Cultural Revolution?
Sorry?
When was the Cultural Revolution?
That was in the, God. I'll find out.
I've got a feeling that was 68 as well. I might be wrong.
I'm going to check.
It's in my
I think you
head.
might be
It's about there.
Well, it would seem
And it's
to
like,
fit
it
the.
feels like, these Mayan
I'm not being
calendars.
funny, but it would seem to fit the mad date, wouldn't
Well,
it?
yeah, and I've just got a feeling. But these Mayan calendars that people talk about. There was 2012.
Yeah. You start
wonder
believing
if
it.
68 they've got it wrong, and if 68 was
Shall I
actually
just
the
check it
end
now?
of one of these. So yeah, go on. I'll
Yeah, give
try
us a
and
minute,
work
yeah.
out
No,
what
it's,
have I learnt
I thought
today.
it was in the 70s, but I think you're right.
So we've talked about what Vietnam.
Yeah, but
We've talked about.
well, I think it's about the asking that question. What the fucking hell was going on?
What was
Sorry
going
to
on?
swear.
Assassinations, wars,
Yeah,
free love, anarchy, cults, and
the
sex
death of
and
music.
death. Sex and death, basically, Alfie. That's
Yeah,
what it comes down to.
Never trust a rock group when they get used.
When they're going to use Hell's Angels. Yeah, never get Hell's Angels to do your security.
Well, they might have done a good job at at Woodstock, when there was no security, except when the police had to come
Well,
in.
no, but again, this is a weird thing, isn't it? It's like you've got this whole thing at the moment, defund the police, and you've got these areas in America being taken over, and doing a similar freedom in inverted commas thing, But there's no facilities, there's no security, there's no.
We just checked. So
There's none of that, and if they knew their history, they'd know that this Woodstockian ideal that they're trying to recreate wouldn't
I
have
don't
worked
think
if the
they are,
police
actually.
hadn't come in and
I
done the
just think that-
facilities.
I mean, Woodstock was.
You
it was
feel
a
like
scam.
these kids now are trying to recreate that kind of thing, this Woodstock idea, maybe.
don't
No
think so, I
police,
don't-
free concert, free, everyone's free and being happy.
Wait, what am I looking
it
for?
turns
Cultural
out-
Revolution.
Yeah, and it turns out
If
that
it comes
the-
up, if it comes up, 1968, I'm dead.
But yeah, that's a fascinating little. This is what I'm looking for, crossbleeds between then and now, and I think that's a great one. You know, that Woodstock, no police. Actually, there was loads of police, and they were the ones organising the toilets, and keeping people safe, and organising the healthcare. And it's like, well, that's exactly the same thing as you've got in like Portland and.
Right, one moment.
What do they call it? That one beginning with M. That started all this nonsense off. And these cities in America right now, you know, Chaz and all that.
1966.
66, the Cultural Revolution.
Yeah.
So yeah, still similar period.
Oh God, yeah.
When it was reverberating across.
Until.
But yeah, that's, well, we can hit that one at some point
and,
down
well,
the line in our conversations.
I didn't realise it was that long. It lasted until 1967.
So 66, 67, you've got Cultural Revolution in China. And then 68, you've got all these points of revolution and change and assassination and craziness in the rest of the world.
One moment, I just want to...
Yeah, we'll have to look at some of the films from around there next week, maybe. I think send me some in the week. And we'll have a look at some of the films.
Right.
Should we wrap up?
I think so, I'm knackered.
Remember, if you've got this far, you've done really well, and go to the www.teahousetheatre.co.uk and buy some tea. Please like and subscribe. See, there you go, got it all in, Alf. Good to see you again.
Nice one, Freddie.
I'll speak to you next week, mate. If I can make this thing work. Make this thing work.
Is that okay?
Yeah, it's still going. I can't seem to make it. We might have some really weird audio at the end of this because I can't turn this off. Why can't I turn this off?
What happens if you take
The yeah, I don't know. I'm going to have to check and find out.
Everyone says that. I thought it was very interesting. So, you know, if you look at the guitar, there's probably only half a dozen masters. That's why.
Alright guys, how long did that take you?
About an hour. I don't know. I'm still just.
More than an hour.
Guitar music that isn't great.
I don't know what's happened to this.
Make it as great as possible. You know, that's what you do.